Okay, so number 7. So number 7 is about dimes and quarters. So let's take a look here. It says, Victoria has been saving dimes and quarters. She has 94 coins in all, and the total value of the coins is $19.30. How many dimes and how many quarters does she have? So this question is asking us to find the number of dimes and the number of quarters that Victoria has. So let's figure out what pieces of information we already know. But before we do that, let's figure out what we're actually solving for. So we want to know how many dimes and quarters she has. So let's figure out what our X's and Y labels should be. So in this case, X, let's make X be dimes. So X is the number of dimes that Victoria has, and Y is the number of quarters Victoria has. The next part, what do we do next? Is write the equations. So I'm setting this up. Underneath is the equations. Now looking back at this, the story here, there doesn't look like there is a lot of information. So there's a lot of information that we have to know from our general knowledge of how money works. But first, let's see what we do know from this story, or what we could take from the story. So it says that she has 94 coins all in total, right? So in this case, if we add up the number of dimes and quarters together, we get 94 coins. So I can say, let's highlight the information that's important. So if I take 94 of the coins, of the dimes and quarters, do this in pink. My first equation, if I add up my X's and my Y's, I should get 94. In other words, if I add up my dimes and my quarters, I should get 94 coins. The second equation, let's take a look what else we know from this. So you can see here when we add up all of our coins, we get $19.30. Well, first let's think about how much a dime is in money terms. A dime, oh, that's my highlighter. A dime is about 10 cents, right? So in other words, 0.1. A quarter is 25 cents. In other words, 0.25. So using that information, if I want to know how many or how much dimes I have in money, then I would multiply my X, the number of dimes I have, with 0.1. So in this case, my second equation is going to look like 0.1, which represents 10 cents, times, I guess I don't need to write that 0 there, because that would just mean more multiplication. So 0.1 is good enough. And that's my coefficient for my X, because X is the number of dimes. So you want to multiply the price of, how much a dime is worth by the number of dimes you have. We're going to do the same thing with quarters. So a quarter is worth 25 cents, so 0.25. And we're going to multiply that with the number of quarters we have. And when we multiply and then add these two terms together, we should get the total amount we have money-wise. So in this case, $19.30. Or you can think of 19.3. It really doesn't matter if you keep that 0. You should end up getting the same answer. I'm just making this cleaner. So looking at these two equations, these, since we have two equations and the x's and y's line up, perhaps it's better if I want to solve these equations to use elimination. Yeah, I would say elimination. It would be a good one to use. So looking at this, we want to see which variables is good to cancel. Now for our x's and y's, they look like they both don't have the same coefficients, and they both don't have the same, they don't have opposite in signs either. So, but all of them happen to be positive. In this scenario, you want to just end up choosing one to multiply, because we're going to have to multiply to make them opposite in signs and the same coefficient. So I think I'm going to multiply the first equation just because the coefficient is 1, so that's just easier to handle with. So I'm going to multiply the first equation to try to cancel out with this x here. So this x is 0.1, positive 0.1. So I need to make sure that this x is negative 0.1. How do I do that? Well, I need to multiply the top equation by negative 0.1. So if I multiply the top equation by negative 0.1, I'm going to need to distribute. So if I distribute this, let's do this in pink, into this equation, we have negative 0. Oh, let me put a line underneath here. We're adding these two equations because we're using elimination. So negative 0.1 x, and then if I distribute this to my y, I get negative 0.1 y equals what is negative 0.1 times 94. So if I do negative 0.1 times 94, I get negative, let me do that in black, negative 9.4. And then the second equation, you can see that we didn't multiply anything here. So we're just going to bring it down. So copy and paste, 0.1x plus 0.25y equals 19. So adding these two equations up, you can see that our x's are opposite in signs and both have the same coefficients, so they cancel. Negative 0.1 y plus 0.25, let's see what that would be. So if we add those two coefficients up, we get 0.15 y, negative 9.4 plus 19. So negative 9.4 plus 19 gives me 9.6. And it's okay that we're working in decimal form for this problem because we're handling money. A lot of the word systems of equations problems, you can use decimals because typically you use systems of equation when you're handling money. So to get this y by itself, I need to divide by 0.5. So divide both sides by 1.5. So 0.15 cancels out. And then we have, let's move this up just a little bit, y by itself, 9.6 divided by 0.15. That is 64. That means, let's see what y represents. Y represents number of quarters, right? So she has 64 quarters in her savings. So in this case, let's circle that so we know how many quarters we have. So now that we know how many quarters she has, let's go figure out how many dimes she has. So looking back at your two equations, which equation would be a good one to use? Well, in this case, I would say equation 1. because you can see here that equation 1, this one represents when we add the quarter and the dimes together, we get 94 coins. And also there's no decimals, constants in front, there's no decimal constants in front of, coefficients in front of the x and y, so it's just easier to use. You could use equation 2, but it'd be a little bit of a hassle because you have those decimal coefficients in front. So I'm going to use equation 1. So rewriting equation 1, we have x plus y equals 94, and we're plugging in 64 for y. So that's going to be x plus 64 equals 94. So looking at this, if I want to get x by itself, I need to subtract both sides by 64. My x, I can bring it down. My 64 cancels, bring down my equal sign. 94 minus 64. That is 30. So I know my x is 30, but x is the number of dimes I have. So I know I have 30 dimes. So putting this all together, we know that we have, for the number of dimes we have is, so number of dimes is equal to 30. So you have 30 dimes, or you could just say 30 dimes and 25 quarters. I'm sorry, not 25 quarters, 64 quarters, because that's what our y ended up being. So I'm just writing it this way though. Number of quarters equals 64. So in this case, we were able to find how many dimes and quarters Victoria had. So boxing that in. Okay, that's basically it.